Welcome back to the channel, fellow shredder. Bernd here. As you can see, I finally have a new setup, a little home studio, all for myself. I still have to improve the reverb with some additional audio treatment. So since we are already talking about home studio mistakes with this, let's go through 6 of the worst of them when it comes to recording guitar at home. I'm sure you were really frustrated at some point with the quality of your own recordings. Or maybe you don't even know where to start since you don't have any equipment yet. So one of my personal biggest mistakes was not getting a proper USB interface right away. This is pretty much the most essential thing you will need when you're starting out, because you probably want to connect your guitar to your computer or laptop somehow. And this sadly doesn't really work out that well. When I started out, I had a really cheap interface and don't even remember the brand name anymore. So when it was time to record my very first guitar track for a professional studio job at home, the producer told me that the DI tracks that I sent had a weird buzz on them. And that unwanted noise was of course greatly amplified when he was reamping all of my signals. In the end, he basically told me to
record everything again from scratch.
And I still have nightmares about that production. So guys and girls, please be smarter than me. Like pretty much everybody else, I'm working with the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. I even recorded most of my new album Elevation with it and went into the studio with the DI tracks for reamping and mixing. Pro tip number 1. If you want something fancier, my producer recently recommended the Universal Audio Apollo Twin Mark II. This one also comes with tons of awesome plugins as far as I know. But if you're just starting out, I don't really think that you can go wrong with this one. The second huge mistake that might result in some extensive re-recordings is a badly intonated guitar. And this one is a really sneaky problem factor. Because what I don't mean with this is recording with a guitar that's simply out of tune. Beautiful. What this is all about is recording with a guitar that's not intonated properly. So while your open strings might be perfectly in tune, the notes you are playing and fretting are slightly sharp or flat because the guitar isn't set up correctly. The devilish detail right here is that you might not even hear this when you're just working with this one guitar. But as soon as you start adding other instruments like bass or samples, you will notice that something is terribly wrong. And trust me, this results in a lot of drama and extra work. So my suggestion is bringing the guitar to a shop or to a professional before very important recording appointments and also telling them the tuning you will record in. I have to admit, I personally always was about playing and practicing with my instruments and not so much about setting them up and taking care of them. So I always prefer bringing them into a shop before tours or before very important studio appointments, just to make sure that everything is set up correctly. Pro tip number 2 concerning that. Please also make sure to change your strings for the best possible results. We also change them multiple times in the studio when we're working for a couple of days. Yes, it's tedious to constantly change strings when you're in the studio, but trust me, it will pay off with your sound. Another huge and quite serious mistake on your guitar journey concerns around 70% of you awesome people that are watching this video right now. Yes, I know I'm repeating myself, but nothing has changed. Still around 70% of you fellow shredders are not a real part of our amazing YouTube guitar community yet. So make sure to join the cool kids right now by subscribing. At least we like to think we're the cool kids. You will really benefit from being part of our shred community here on YouTube. So what I can't recommend enough personally is always recording a DI track. So the naked, unedited, untouched, rough signal that comes straight out of your guitar. Because another one of my personal early mistakes was recording with a sound that I thought was perfect as a teenager. And then the producer of my first band told me that it's absolutely terrible. And he made a couple of good points. Way too much gain. Why did you scoop the mids that much? There is zero clarity with this tone. All I can hear is why did you record 4 lead guitar tracks that all do the exact same thing? Oh, somebody told you about quad tracking, right? Yeah, thanks a lot for that constructive input. So when you always capture that raw DI signal, you can give your producer a lot of freedom to reamp it and to change the sound after the recordings. This is so awesome because you can leave open all creative options. An aggressive high gain part might become a crunch channel section, or a beautifully arranged and planned clean part might turn into a fuzzy distorted mess. So if you are working with a Kemper or any other modern or classic amplifier, you can still record your signature sound that you really like, and you also simultaneously record a DI track of what you're playing. That way you can still send over your preferred tone for the part, and in case it doesn't work out in the mix, you still have the possibility to change it afterwards. I show you exactly how to do this in the home recording course that I published on Patreon that I will talk about in just 1 second. But first, pro tip number 3. When you're dialing in your input levels, make sure to check them with your heaviest picking strokes or accents to avoid any clipping. So that would be too much. Better safe than sorry, you really need a good and clean signal for any kind of further processing in the studio. Now, if you still don't know where to start with recording your guitar at home, with mixing and mastering your own songs, with EQing your takes, with effects and all of that stuff, I recorded a full 30-minute home recording online course just for you with Austrian multi-platinum producer Daniel Fellner. This one is available for all members on Patreon, and you will learn how to easily dial in your perfect guitar tone, how to EQ and process your takes, how to mix your own songs, and much, much more. As always, the link is in the description below and pinned as the first comment. Yes, this one might sound a bit boring, but it's incredibly important as well. So when I started out, I really didn't care about that tedious last step, exporting my files, my songs and my demos. MP3 is what I knew by name. Back when I was young, I still had an MP3 player. Most of you won't even know what that is. I even had a Discman. Yes, I know I'm getting old. So I really didn't know about the differences with all those formats and if it really matters that much. Turns out your producer won't be happy when you send him or her a heavily compressed MP3 file. Of course, I also learned that the hard way. So before you start exporting hundreds of files, make sure to ask what's preferred. Most of the time it's an uncompressed WAV file, 24-bit, 48 kHz or 44.1 kHz. So don't mix up all kinds of different settings when you're exporting your files for your studio production. It will drive your producer or engineer crazy, and of course it costs a lot of extra time and work. Pro tip number 4 concerning this: always make sure to bounce your tracks with the exact same pre-count to make things really easy for the studio. If you just place your locators randomly with each track, it will be very tedious to arrange all the different tracks correctly. If you always leave 2 or 4 meshes, for example, the workflow of putting the projects together will be really easy, and your producer will love you for small details like that. Attention! One detail that can really ruin your high gain tracks is if you constantly have open strings ringing through, especially when you're shredding. We looked at a lot of really helpful exercises to fix technique mistakes like that with your playing, but it does take quite a long time to adjust your technique and to correct bad playing habits like that. So if you're not quite there yet and you still have to deliver clean and perfectly executed tracks, I can really recommend using a fret wrap for your recordings. If you don't have one, you can also just use a cloth or a sock. Please just make sure to wash them first. In my personal opinion and experience, it's not that good to always practice with a string dampener, especially if you want to learn how to play without one at one point. But for recording purposes, it's perfectly fine. You will get a much cleaner signal, and the clarity of your sound and takes will really benefit from that, of course. Pro tip number 5. I always really liked the Groove Gear fret wraps and used them quite a lot over the last couple of years. Nowadays I mostly use them if I have to record tricky tapping parts that don't allow me to mute the other strings with my palm, for example. Your DAW or DAW or digital audio workstation is where you record, mix, master, produce and so on. When I started out, I made the mistake of saving money at the wrong places, and I worked with a free program that had tons of limitations, from export settings to recording quality to effects and so on. I'm quite sure that things have changed by now and that there's a lot of awesome free recording software out there. Make sure to comment which DAW you are using at the moment. So anyways, what made a huge difference for me is upgrading to Cubase at some point. I currently work with Cubase 11, and once you figure out your personal workflow, you will have a great time recording every day without any limitations and in professional quality, of course. Pro tip number 6. Spend just a bit of extra time on research and try to find the program that's best for you and your personal needs. Most people I know work with Cubase, Logic or Pro Tools. And finally, something a bit more creative. How do you actually set up your projects once you have all your gear, and how do you start recording your guitar takes? What obviously made a huge difference right away is double tracking my rhythm guitars and panning them left and right. This makes them really big and awesome sounding, and you will be completely blown away when you do this for the very first time. But since this sounded so awesome, I started doing this for everything that I recorded, from bass to lead guitar tracks to solos and so on. And as you can probably imagine, this didn't have the same effect at all. I thought that more is more when it comes to songwriting and recording, but in this case less is truly more. Your song and project probably doesn't need 10 lead guitar tracks, 6 rhythm guitar tracks, 12 keyboard sample layers, 4 different drum kits and so on. Just keep it simple, especially when you're starting out. Record 2 rhythm guitar tracks and pan them left and right. Add some guitar solos or lead guitar tracks if you have some great ideas. And if you feel like certain parts sound too empty, you can still figure it out later in the studio with your producer, after looking at the frequency spectrum. Pro tip number 7. Please try to avoid working in the same section of your fretboard for different rhythm and lead guitar tracks. Use your knowledge and fretboard visualization skills to your advantage and spread out your ideas across multiple octaves. That way you make everything much more transparent and your tracks won't clash and battle each other in the exact same spot in the mix. I really hope that I could help you out today by showing you some of my personal worst guitar home recording mistakes. Make sure to get the full home recording course on Patreon to learn much more about dialing in your perfect tone, mixing, mastering, EQing and all that good stuff. And here's your random German word for today: Quintenzirkel. This one is extremely scary. It is our German overly complicated word for the circle of fifths. Make sure to comment this below. I'm really looking forward to seeing your spelling for that. Let's confuse everybody together that didn't watch this video until the end. Leave a like in case you enjoyed, and don't forget to subscribe to join our awesome YouTube community. See you soon. Bye bye.